Prague, early May 1945. The war in Europe has days left to run. On a road outside the city, an SS general is traveling with a small escort. He is one of the most important men in the collapsing Reich, and one of the most dangerous. He knows the blueprints of the V2 rocket. He knows the locations of hidden underground factories carved into mountains. He knows the secrets of jet aircraft and experimental weapons that the Americans and Soviets would kill to possess. His name is Hans Kammler. And then, somewhere on that road, in those final chaotic days, Hans Kammler ceases to exist. His adjutant would later say Kammler ordered him to shoot him rather than let him be captured. Another account says he took cyanide. Another says he was killed in a skirmish. Another says he shot himself. 4 stories, 4 different deaths, and not one confirmed body. For a man who carried the crown jewels of Nazi weapons technology in his head, that's not just a loose end. It's the beginning of one of the strangest disappearances of the entire war. Hans Kammler didn't start as a soldier. He started as a builder. And that's exactly what made him so lethal. Born in 1901, Kammler trained as a civil engineer. He was ambitious, cold, and ruthlessly efficient, a man who saw human beings as units in a construction schedule. He joined the Nazi Party and the SS, and he rose fast. Because he could do the one thing the SS desperately needed, he could build enormous projects, fast, using slave labor, without a flicker of conscience. By the early 1940s, Kammler headed the construction division of the SS. And this is where his name becomes truly infamous. Kammler was the engineer responsible for the vast expansion of the concentration camp system. He oversaw construction at Auschwitz-Birkenau, including the crematoria and the gas chambers. He literally designed and built the architecture of the Holocaust's killing machinery. Let that sit. Before he ever touched a rocket, Hans Kammler had already earned a place among the greatest mass murderers in history, not with a gun, but with a blueprint and a work crew of prisoners he worked to death. By 1943, Nazi Germany was losing. Its cities were being flattened by Allied bombing, and Hitler was pinning his last hopes on wonder weapons, the Vergeltungswaffen, the vengeance weapons that were supposed to turn the tide. The most famous was the V2, the world's first long-range ballistic missile, designed by Wernher von Braun's team. But there was a problem. The factories building them kept getting bombed. So the Nazis decided to move production underground, into tunnels, into mountains, where no bomber could reach. And who do you put in charge of building underground factories with slave labor at impossible speed? Hans Kammler. Kammler took control of the Mittelwerk, the vast underground rocket factory in the Harz Mountains, built and operated through the neighboring Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp. The conditions were beyond horrific. It's estimated that around 20,000 prisoners died building and operating that facility. More people killed making the V2 than were ever killed by it. Kammler ran it. By 1944, his power was expanding almost by the week. He was given control over V2 deployment, then over jet aircraft production, including the revolutionary Me-262. In the final months, in a sign of just how much the leadership trusted him, Kammler was handed sweeping authority over Germany's most advanced weapons programs. He answered directly to the very top of the SS. So by early 1945, one man sat at the center of nearly every secret weapons project the Reich had. Hans Kammler was a walking archive of the most advanced military technology on the planet, and he knew it. Now here is what makes the ending so murky. In the final weeks of the war, Kammler didn't behave like a man preparing to die. He behaved like a man preparing to bargain. As the Reich collapsed, Kammler moved key rocket scientists, including von Braun and his team, southward, away from the advancing Soviets and toward the Americans. Some historians believe this wasn't just following orders. They think Kammler understood exactly what those men, and the knowledge in his own head, were worth to the Western Allies. He may have been assembling bargaining chips. There are accounts that Kammler spoke openly about using his knowledge to negotiate, that he considered offering the secrets of German rocketry and jet technology to the Americans in exchange for his life and freedom. Then, in late April and early May 1945, he traveled to the Prague area into the chaos of the very last days. And that is where the trail shatters into pieces. This is the heart of the mystery, because we don't have one story of how Hans Kammler died. We have at least 4, and they contradict each other completely. Version 1 comes from his adjutant, a man named Kurt Krug. He claimed that near Prague, with capture looming, Kammler ordered him to shoot him in the back of the head to avoid falling into enemy hands, and that he complied. Version 2 says Kammler took a cyanide capsule, like so many other senior Nazis. Version 3 says he shot himself with his own pistol. Version 4 says he was killed in a firefight with Czech partisans during the uprising in Prague. Each account came from a different source, at a different time, and they cannot all be true. There was never a recovered, identified body. No grave. No forensic confirmation. Just a scatter of incompatible stories, all conveniently ending with Kammler safely dead and unavailable for questioning. And when a man that important dies 4 different ways with no corpse, investigators start to wonder whether he died at all. This is where the story takes its most controversial turn, because for decades, a persistent theory has argued that Hans Kammler never died in May 1945, that he did exactly what he'd hinted at and traded himself to the Americans. The logic is seductive. The United States was about to launch Operation Paperclip, the secret program to scoop up Nazi scientists and their knowledge before the Soviets could. Kammler wasn't just a scientist, he was the manager who controlled the entire secret weapons empire. To American intelligence, a man like that would be almost priceless. In recent years, a Czech historian and journalist named Matthias U uncovered documents suggesting that American intelligence had, in fact, taken a serious interest in Kammler. And there were indications of contact, of interrogation, of Kammler possibly being in American hands after the war. The story made international headlines had the man who built the gas chambers been secretly protected by the US, because his knowledge was too valuable to waste. But, and this is crucial, the evidence is contested. Other historians caution that the documents are ambiguous, that intelligence agencies routinely chased and filed rumors, and that interest in a target is not the same as proof he was captured and hidden. The most rigorous assessment is that we genuinely do not know. The he made a deal theory is possible, tantalizing, and unproven. Here is the honest, actually at the center of it all the truth isn't a confirmed secret deal. And it isn't a confirmed death. It's a void. One of the most important war criminals of the entire conflict simply dropped out of the record, and the sources we have are too contradictory to close the gap. And that void has done something predictable. It has pulled in every wild theory imaginable. Because Kammler controlled the Reich's most secret programs and then vanished without a body, he has become a favorite character in the world of Nazi conspiracy legends. You'll find claims that Kammler was overseeing a secret German atomic bomb project. Claims that he ran a hidden base developing exotic wonder weapons. His name gets attached to the legend of Die Glock, the so-called Nazi bell, and even to stories of Nazi UFOs and secret technology flown out of Germany in the final days. It's worth being clear-eyed about this. There is no credible evidence that Kammler was building an atomic bomb that worked, or flying saucers, or anti-gravity machines. Those stories thrive precisely because of the two things we've established. He genuinely did control real, advanced, secret weapons programs, and he genuinely did disappear without a trace. That combination, real secrecy plus a real vanishing, is rocket fuel for myth. The missing evidence gets reframed as proof of a cover-up, and the legend becomes unfalsifiable. But strip the fantasy away, and what's left is disturbing enough. The documented Kammler didn't need a magic bell to be a monster. He built gas chambers. He ran tunnels where 20,000 people died. He commanded the missile that terrorized London. The real man was more than horrifying enough. The myths, if anything, insult the memory of his actual victims by turning a mass murderer into a comic book supervillain with secret toys. So when you see Kammler's name attached to some sensational claim about Nazi super science, remember what's really underneath it. Not a mystery of lost technology, but the far simpler and darker mystery of how such a man was allowed to slip away. You might ask, does it really matter how one SS general died? It matters enormously, and here is why. Kammler represents a collision between two of the darkest currents of the post-war era. On one side, justice. This was a man who built gas chambers and worked tens of thousands of prisoners to death in his tunnels. He belonged in a courtroom, then on a gallows. On the other side, the Cold War and the ruthless race for German technology. The uncomfortable reality of Operation Paperclip is that the United States really did recruit Nazi scientists, men with blood on their hands, because their knowledge was considered too valuable to hand to the Soviets. Von Braun, Kammler's own protege in the rocket program, went on to help put America on the moon. So the Kammler question isn't just did he die, it's how far did the West go? If a man who designed the machinery of the Holocaust could be quietly absorbed because he knew about rockets, then the line between hunting Nazis and using them becomes terrifyingly thin. That's why the void where Kammler's fate should be still makes historians deeply uncomfortable. It sits exactly on that line. So what happened to Hans Kammler? The most likely answer is that he died somewhere near Prague in the first days of May 1945. Though we can't say by whose hand, or even prove it happened at all, because no body was ever confirmed. And a real possibility remains that the master of Hitler's secret weapons cheated the noose entirely and slipped into the shadows of Cold War intelligence carrying his terrible knowledge with him. Either way, the man who built the gas chambers never stood trial. He was never sentenced, never hanged, never forced to look his victims' families in the eye. He either died on his own terms in the chaos, or he was quietly deemed too useful to punish. And that leaves a question that should genuinely disturb us. We tell ourselves that the worst criminals face justice. But what happens when a monster is also an asset? When the knowledge in his head is worth more to the powerful than the crimes on his hands? Do we still hunt him? Or do we hire him? Tell me what you believe happened to Hans Kammler in the comments. If you found this insightful, watch what happened to Project Rees after WWII. Next, the enormous underground complex that Kammler's construction empire helped carve into a Polish mountain and whose true purpose is still unknown. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more history inside. Thanks for watching.